Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 10, Episode 02. In a world championing collaboration and constant connection, why is the crucial skill of deep work becoming so paradoxically rare? Join us as we explore Cal Newport's deep work to uncover the hidden forces at play. Welcome to the Deep Dive. So our mission today, as always, is to dig into some really insightful sources. We're looking specifically at excerpts from Cal Newport's fantastic book, Deep Work, Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. And we're going to try and distill the most important bits for you.
Yeah, this deep dive is really all about understanding why deep work, even though we know it's so valuable, seems to be getting pushed aside more and more in, the modern workplace.
That's right. We'll be digging into the underlying reasons, exploring why organizations, and individuals too, often just sort of drift away from this really critical skill without even realizing it sometimes. It's quite a puzzle, actually, and it has real implications for, your productivity, your career path. Okay, so let's just jump right into this paradox because it is fascinating. We're in this economy, right, that increasingly rewards deep work. That ability to really focus, distraction-free on something tough, cognitively demanding. But then you look around and so many trends in the workplace seem to be actively, undermining it. It feels like businesses are maybe missing out big time and often don't even know it.
It's a real contradiction.
So what are some of these trends? I mean, the first thing that jumps out is probably the move towards massive open office plans. You think about companies like Facebook, they've got that 10-acre open space designed by Frank Gehry.
Yep, huge. Yeah. Or Jack Dorsey's Square. Developers working side by side in these common areas, long shared desks. The idea is supposed to be fostering serendipity.
Right, that's spontaneous collaboration. But it's all about constant interaction, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's not just the physical layout. Think about the explosion of instant messaging. It's definitely not just for teenagers anymore. Newport mentions a senior product manager at IBM who actually boasted about sending 2.5 million IMs a day inside the company.
Wow. 2.5 million.
Yeah. And then you've got companies like Hall where employees are actually trained to rapidly switch from coding to answering questions on their real-time collaboration platform.
Yeah.
It's all about that quick back and forth.
And we can't forget the social media pressure, especially if you're creating content. Even the New York Times, right? They encourage hundreds of their writers, editors, photographers to be active on Twitter. It's just, it's the new normal. So much so that when, the novelist Jonathan Franzen criticized Twitter, calling it maybe a bit coercive.
Oh, I remember that.
He got absolutely hammered for it online. People made that sarcastic hashtag Jonathan Franzen hates trend. It really feels like you just have to be plugged in constantly, no debate allowed.
And here's the kicker, right? All these trends, they promise benefits, collaboration, speed, whatever, but often they actively reduce our capacity for deep work. Those open offices. Neuroscientists say they cause massive distraction because even if you think you're tuning it out, your brain is still processing that background chatter, and that uses up mental energy.
Okay, that makes sense.
And instant messaging, way more interruptive than email because it demands immediate attention. There's research from Gloria Mark. She's an expert on attention fragmentation. She watched knowledge workers and found even really short interruptions significantly delay getting a task done. She called it very detrimental to overall output. It really fragments your focus.
Yeah, it's almost painful to imagine, serious journalists trying to piece together complex stories, needing that focused time.
Right.
And they're being pushed to interrupt that for what George Packer, the New Yorker writer, called frothy back and forth online tittering.
He nailed it with that phrase.
He really did. And Packer himself said he stays off Twitter because, his words, Twitter's crack for media addicts. It scares me. And then what happens? He goes on to win a National Book Award for The Unwinding. No tweets needed.
Kind of proves the point, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so we see what's happening. Deep work seems under threat from these trends. But the big question is why? Why are organizations letting this happen, maybe even encouraging it, when deep work is so valuable?
Yeah, and Newport argues it's not really about people being inherently weak or lazy. It's more about, flawed ways of thinking and just how ambiguous knowledge work often is.
Okay, so what's the first factor?
The first big one, and it's a tough nut to crack, is what Newport labels the metric black hole. Basically, it's just incredibly hard to measure the actual bottom line value of deep work. Or, the flip side, the real cost. When deep work didn't happen, we might feel distraction costs us, but putting a precise number on it, that's really difficult.
And there's a concrete example of this, right? Tom Cochran at Atlantic Media.
Exactly. He was the CTO, And he got worried about his own email habits, so he decided to actually measure it. Found he was dealing with something like 160 emails a day.
Wow.
And even if he only spent 30 seconds on each one, that added up to nearly an hour and a half every single day, just shuffling information.
Just on email.
Just email.
Yeah.
But then he took it further. He did this complex calculation for the whole company and figured out Atlantic Media was spending over $1 million a year paying people just to process email. It worked out to like 95 cents per message.
That's staggering. 95 cents an email.
It is. But think about what it took to figure that out. Company-wide surveys, digging through IT data, salary information, building statistical models. It was a massive effort. Most places just aren't going to do that.
Right, it's too complicated.
Precisely. And this difficulty, it applies way beyond email. Knowledge work is just inherently tricky to measure in terms of individual output. Thomas Piketty, the economist.
Yeah, famous for his work on inequality.
He pointed this out regarding executive pay, how it's just objectively difficult to measure exactly what one person contributes to a company's success. So this metric black hole, it means that behaviors that really hurt deep work, even if they're costly, they don't set off red flags on a spreadsheet. So they just, well, they stick around, they flourish because their negative impact isn't clearly visible.
Okay, so the measurement problem is huge. But is that the whole story? It feels like there's got to be something more sort of human going on, too.
Oh, definitely. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Beyond just the numbers, or lack thereof, human behavior is a massive factor. We often default to what Newport calls the principle of least resistance.
The principle of least resistance. Okay, what's that?
Simply put, in a work environment where there isn't clear, immediate feedback on the impact of what you're doing, we humans tend to drift towards behaviors that are just easiest in the moment. It's a very natural pull, but it often works directly against deep work.
Okay, I can see that, like the culture of connectivity you hear about.
Exactly like that. Leslie Perlow, a professor at Harvard Business School, she studied this, found professional spending, get this, 20 to 25 extra hours a week outside of normal work hours, just monitoring email.
25 hours, just checking email.
Yeah, because they felt they had to respond within an hour. They genuinely believed their business demanded it.
Wow.
But then Perlow did this fascinating experiment at Boston Consulting Group BCG, super high pressure environment.
Right.
She basically forced one team to take 1 day a week completely off the grid. No email, no calls, nothing.
Nothing.
And initially, people were terrified. The consultants, the partner leading the team, they thought their careers were on the line. They'd lose clients.
I bet. That sounds risky in that kind of culture.
Totally. But what actually happened, they didn't lose any clients. The team members actually enjoyed their work more, they communicated better internally, they learned more from each other, and crucially, they delivered a better product, according to the client.
So the constant connection was actually hurting them.
It seems like it was.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to your earlier question. If disconnecting proved beneficial, why does that hyper-connected culture persist?
Yeah. Why?
Well, Newport pins it largely on that principle of least resistance. It's just easier to stay connected. Getting instant answers feels simpler in the moment than, say, planning ahead or setting aside a task while you wait for info. And it makes it super easy to just manage your day from your inbox, right? Respond to the latest urgent thing, feel busy, feel productive. Instead of doing the harder, more cognitively demanding work of real planning, think about something like David Allen's Getting Things Done system.
GTD, yeah. Very detailed.
Extremely detailed. Where
Yeah.
There's a 15-step flowchart just for processing your inbox. It's much, much easier to just hit reply all on the latest email chain than to implement something that complex. Even GTD might be more effective long-term.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It explains other things, too, like those back-to-back meetings that chop up your day so you can't focus. They stick around because scheduling a meeting is often the easiest way to force action on something.
Precisely. Or the habit of just forwarding an email with a quick, vague thoughts.
Oh, yeah, I get those.
We all do. It's easy for the sender clears their plate, but it just pushes the cognitive work and the time commitment onto everyone else who gets it. That easy action for one person creates difficulty for many.
So difficulty measuring impact and our tendency to take the easy path. What else is driving this?
Well, building on those two, especially the lack of clear metrics, is this powerful tendency to treat busyness as a stand-in for productivity. If you can't easily see the value someone is creating, you look for signs of effort.
How so?
Think about the difference between, say, a research professor and a typical knowledge worker. A professor's success is often pretty clearly tied to publishing significant research. maybe measured by something like an H-index.
Right, that number reflecting publications and citations.
Exactly. It's a reasonably objective measure of impact. That's why someone like Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, could adopt what he called an actively irresponsible stance, basically avoiding committees and admin stuff.
Because he knew what really mattered for his success.
He knew his deep physics work required absolute solid lengths of time, and the metrics backed that up. That clarity makes it easier to prioritize deep work and push back against distractions.
But most of us aren't Richard Feynman, right? We don't have an H-index for our work.
Exactly. Most knowledge workers operate in what the writer Matthew Crawford called a bewildering psychic landscape. It's just much harder to pin down what value looks like day to day.
I remember Crawford, didn't he leave a think tank job to become a motorcycle mechanic?
That's the one. He found a satisfaction in the tangible results of fixing a machine that he just couldn't find in the abstract world of reports and strategy documents. He could see his productivity on the bike, not so much in the office.
So, without those clear signs of actual accomplishment.
Many knowledge workers default back to a kind of industrial age mindset about productivity. Think assembly lines, Frederick Taylor's efficiency studies. Productivity meant doing lots of stuff, visibly, making widgets. Newport calls this busyness as proxy for productivity. People lean towards visible activity because they lack a better way to demonstrate their value to themselves and others.
And that explains why things like constantly firing off emails, bouncing between meetings, being hyper-responsive on Slack, why that makes you look productive.
Precisely. Remember Marissa Mayer's decision at Yahoo to ban remote work. Part of the justification, reportedly, was that she couldn't see if people were visibly busy enough by checking server logs when they worked from home.
So if I'm not visibly bustling, I must not be working hard.
That was the implied message. But it's such an anachronistic view for knowledge work. Creating value from information often looks like the opposite of busyness.
Yeah, like Adam Grant, the Wharton professor we talked about before, became the youngest full professor there partly by deliberately blocking off time, shutting himself away to write. That's not visible busyness.
Not at all. Under that Yahoo policy, someone like Grant, producing huge value through deep work, might have seemed unproductive, maybe even gotten fired. It highlights the disconnect.
Okay, so we have the metric black hole, the path of least resistance, busyness as a proxy. Is there anything else?
There's one more layer, Newport argues, and it's almost ideological. It's this deep-seated, often unquestioned belief that anything related to the internet, anything digital or connected, must inherently be good or necessary.
Like a tech optimism bias?
Kind of, but maybe even stronger. The communication theorist Neil Postman wrote about this back in the 90s. He called it technopoly.
Technopoly.
Yeah, like a culture where technology's downsides, its trade-offs are just never really discussed. High tech is automatically assumed to be superior, and any alternatives just become, in his words, invisible and therefore irrelevant. We don't even consider not using the latest tool.
Wow. Invisible and irrelevant.
And building on that, Evgeny Morozov, who's sort of Postman's intellectual successor, argues that the internet itself has morphed into an Uber ideology.
An Uber ideology.
Yeah, like it's not just a collection of tools and protocols anymore. It represents the future, progress, revolution. Regardless of whether the specific tools are just, products made by companies trying to make money. The underlying belief is your company must embrace all things internet to be relevant.
Oh, okay, I see how that connects. It explains why a serious newspaper like the New York Times pushes its Paris bureau chief, Alyssa Rubin, someone dealing with complex international reporting.
Right, needing deep focus.
Pushes her to constantly tweet, to interrupt that vital work to feed this free, often shallow content stream owned by another company.
Exactly. It's probably not based on hard data showing it boosts subscriptions or anything. It's because, in this internet-centric technopoly, not doing it seems unthinkable. The alternative, focusing solely on deep reporting, becomes invisible.
And that also explains the backlash against Jonathan Franzen, right? When he questioned Twitter, it wasn't just a disagreement about marketing books.
No, it was treated almost like heresy, like flag burning, as Newport puts it. Questioning the necessity of social media felt like an attack on progress itself.
You even see it on, trucks for logistics companies saying, like us on Facebook. What does refrigerated trucking have to do with Facebook likes?
Nothing, really. But it shows how pervasive this ideology is. It's just assumed you have to participate in the digital sphere, regardless of relevance.
So deep work is at a disadvantage here.
A severe disadvantage.
Yeah.
Because deep work often involves valuing things like quality, craftsmanship, focused things that feel almost old-fashioned. And crucially, it often requires actively rejecting some of the shiny new distractions that technopoly offers. Without clear metrics, that metric black hole again, to prove its superior value, deep work struggles to compete against that constant demanding, shiny thrum of tweets, likes, and posts. The ideology wins by default.
Okay, so let's pull this together. We've looked at why deep work, which seems so obviously valuable, is becoming weirdly rare. There's the difficulty in measuring its impact, the metric black hole.
Uh-huh. Then our natural human tendency to do what's easiest in the moment, the principle of least resistance.
Right. And then using visible busyness as a substitute for actual productivity, especially when value is hard to see.
And finally, that underlying, almost unquestioning belief in the goodness of all things, internet, the technopoly, or Uber ideology.
It paints a pretty clear picture of the forces working against focused work.
It does. But here's the interesting twist. This situation, while maybe bad for businesses overall if they're missing out on value, it actually creates a pretty significant personal advantage for you, the listener.
Okay. How so?
Because all these forces pushing against deep work, they're based on flawed thinking, measurement difficulties, and ideology, not on deep work itself being flawed.
Right. There's nothing inherently wrong with deep work and nothing fundamentally essential about all the distractions replacing it.
Exactly. So the fact that deep work is becoming rarer just makes it that much more valuable for the individuals who actually figure out how to cultivate it, despite these trends.
That's a really powerful takeaway. The very factors making it scarce are what amplify its rewards for those who commit to it.
Precisely. So it leaves you with a really important question to think about. Now that you understand these hidden forces, the metric, black hole, least resistance, busyness proxy, the cult of the internet, how can you use that understanding? How might it empower you to consciously push back against those trends, cultivate deep work in your own life, and start reaping those increasingly rare and therefore increasingly valuable rewards?